Hola everybody, it's Illuminostic. I wanted to pop on and say hello. It's been a few days since I've live streamed because we've been doing a lot of ceremonies over the last week. Um, I don't know exactly what prompted this. It's something that's on my mind a lot. It's something I've been thinking about for many years, actually, since the 90s, since political correctness started to become a thing at all, I guess. And I suspected right out the gates that it was as much a tool to sort of depersonalize people. Wedge issue, I believe I've heard them called. I may be misappropriating a term there. I've heard people say wedge issue. I'm just assuming that it's meant that their wedge issues are trivial things that are used to divide the populace in order to make them more manageable. So if I'm misusing that term, I just wanted to be clear about what I actually mean when I say it. Um, but it's definitely a real thing, and there are so many issues of like real import and substance and great just many orders of magnitude more important than a lot of the stuff that I see kind of dominating the cultural narrative and different social media platforms. And I just it bothers me. Of course, it's disturbing. I want to see the world actually evolving, and I think that this sort of fixation on these less important issues, they're it's just people should be out protesting war, if anything, and not necessarily getting upset because someone has said herself instead of frog self, which is something I actually saw recently. Somebody that was explaining how to use frog pronouns. And it might seem like maybe I'm creating more wedge issues by, sort of making fun of or ridiculing or finding fault with trivialities myself, and then we're just sort of creating already fractured, um, you know, uh, uh, all with the division, the division and the just making tinier little fractures. You know what I mean? But I think it actually really does matter, and I think that a lot of people in the West and in the United States in particular are really naive about propaganda and whether or not um, governments, Western governments, European governments actually use propaganda. I think a lot of people really just don't think they do, and I think that naivety in the United States in particular is a device that people maybe even semi-consciously use uh, as a way of employing selective perception to avoid inconvenient truths. And um, yeah, so I was thinking about the word antifragility. I saw it as the article of like a big think or title of a big think article or something a few months ago, and I didn't even look it up until today because I just assumed that I kind of understand, and I think that it's a really powerful and essential concept for us to sort of encourage everyone in our orbit to shift gears from this uber fragile. It's almost like there has become this trend of like the more fragile you are, the more superior you can feel. Because the more things you get offended by, the more you're virtue signaling. And the more approval you're going to get by your self righteous indignation, which, in my opinion, is absolutely horrific. It's tragic, it's disturbing, and it is sort of displacing focus on real issues. I mean, I live in the rainforest, and today driving home, I'm looking at destruction of the rainforest. I mean, the biodiversity here is incredible, and even if you just put aside any notion that the ecosystem is actually important, the value solely as an experience of coming here and observing what was that movie with the blue people, Avatar-like environment. I mean, we don't go smashing Disneyland and Universal Studios. Maybe that was a bad analogy, but you understand what I'm saying. It's even just in its entertainment value. This place is worthy of preservation. And I definitely hear far more about pronouns and how to properly use pronouns than I do about preserving the fucking rainforest. I mean, at what point did people completely lose their minds? I mean, it's really a deviation from the fundamentals, and that is a very simple resolution to this. We are focusing on all these sort of fissures and micro topics that really what we have to do is get to the core, the center of the fundamental issue, which is basically just don't be an asshole. If someone wants to be referred to as her, it's not going to hurt you to do so, right? But do we really need to flood social media with instructional videos about, how to address people with the pronouns about, what type of animal they are, whatever? I mean, it's just getting a bit silly. It's been a bit silly. And, I've been saying for 20 years that if you get offended, you need to be offended. Unless you have actually been injured, unless you've actually been harmed, like some real damage has been done to you, or someone has an opinion that actually causes, damage and destruction and pain for people, it's not a problem. And it's not worthy of our attention, and it's not worthy of our energy when we still have a world in which nuclear disarmament has not happened, in which rainforests are still burning down, and it's again, we can sort of distill these issues down into their fundamentals and address those fundamentals rather than allowing our focus and our energy to be dispersed so that it has no real power. you know um, we as individuals really only need to find our real purpose. I think that connecting with our higher self, our true self, our artistic expressions, our real fundamental values, and then being impervious to any other influences. That is the best way for us all to set an example of anti-fragility. I've learned the hard way that preaching is not going to get you anywhere. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. When people have convictions, when people have made up their minds, when people are feeling pressure to conform to, whatever narrative the herd is holding up as your, ultimate expression of cultural politesse, of socialite politesse, right? It is extremely difficult for people, so I'm empathetic, to remain in their center and to be unaffected by these things. And, probably one of the most consistent topics on my channel has been the fact that our loss of a sense of purpose, both collectively and as individuals, is the biggest driving force behind the explosion of this vapid, pointless, insecure, just nihilistic culture that has come into existence. And there is, of course, a huge sort of, like when a rock hits a windshield and you get all these little spidery cracks everywhere. All of these sort of incidentals that come from this crisis of purpose that aren't incidental at all. Like school shootings and the suicide epidemic. We have oceans that are testing positive for Xanax. We have this sort of, I don't even know what to call it. I mean, people accept these narratives that are fed to them without any analysis, you know, and there's almost no way to compel people using logic and reason to change that pattern. There really isn't. But for example, you know, if you look throughout the history of school shootings, mass shootings, and then other isolated incidents like this grandfather that started taking Paxil because he was suffering from mild depression, and a few weeks after he starts the medication, he murders his whole family. You know, we still have a huge, massive demographic that still has a completely irrational faith that is indistinguishable from the faith of a religious fanatic. You know, in the research institutions and the pharmaceutical companies that have created these compounds claim that they're effective. They have this cultural stamp of approval, even though the overwhelming evidence is that they are at very least non-effective and also could have some kind of relationship to these mass killings. And, you know, for example, you can kind of see where the influence of the lobbyists and big pharma, in this case in particular, you know, something's fishy, because we hear a lot about gun control, but how much have we been hearing about, you know, maybe we should take a look at SSRIs, since they've been involved in these shootings 90% of the time, you know? And there is an industry that is, you know, they're lobbying to silence that voice. You know, I'm absolutely certain, and anyone that is my age and has been paying attention for the last 20 years, you'll remember that for a moment, just a very brief flicker, people were saying, hey, what's going on with that? There seems to be this connection there, right? But it just sort of vanished, along with a whole lot of other things. And so, you know, this message that I'm trying to get out here, and I'm trying to really compress this because there's so much that I could say about this subject, and I'm very, very busy right now. So I'm just trying to get it out there and, you know, move on, because I have a lot to do. But, you know, and I'm also sharing this because it's something I think that's like driving itself deeper into my own understanding after years and years and years of, you know, having this YouTube channel and a blog and this stuff, and watching also the receptivity from people as people become more afraid, right? They're less and less receptive to new information. They become more rigid. You know, from a mystical or spiritual or energetic point of view, I talk about this a lot, how, you know, fear is such a problem, because it is like an interference pattern. And what we really need is receptivity, right? We need to be like a hollow tube if we want to bring down fire from heaven, to make a very hyperbolic statement about it. But you know what I mean. And so I think that as people become more and more fearful, they're intellectually and philosophically and politically more and more rigid. They're certainly more and more dangerous. But that, you know, rigidity and inflexibility in the wrong areas is making it harder and harder for us to get out of the dark alley where the specter of history has driven us. It is basically the opposite of what we need. And, you know, I really do try not to be paranoid in my life. I don't really spend any time thinking about conspiracy theories, not much at all. But, you know, I also think that you'd have to be a fool to think that elites never conspire. And if you look at just the paper trail of money that has been spent by every major government in the world studying how to engineer propaganda, to think that they would suddenly just decide that they're not going to bother to try to influence how people think. I mean, it's so difficult for me to understand how it is that people convince themselves of this sort of thing. Yeah, clearly that's totally crazy. And also, you know, when you speak about this kind of thing, people have a tendency to call you a fearmonger. And, you know, I can remember when COVID was going on and some of the other, uh, you know, narratives where people that criticized or questioned or suggested certain things, people just, oh, you're spreading fear and you get canceled. Um, Part of this anti-fragility thing that I'm promoting here is don't be scared. What are you scared of? Who cares? Like, what if you die? Consciousness is eternal. So, you know, you're going to wake up somewhere else. Who cares? Just what are you scared of? You know what I mean? That's the first thing. I've never understood that. What, you know, it's survey your environment and understand it, but do not react to it. You know, in ayahuasca ceremonies, one of the most important things I think that the medicine has taught me is that it's not the experience that causes you to flip out and do irrational things. It is your reaction to the experience, right? And so, you know, this is what integration is about. This is carrying those lessons into your normal life. So, you know, when I talk about propaganda and I talk about the reality that there's basically no chance that there are not powerful people conspiring against the populace, I don't think of it as spreading fear because I'm not scared of it. You know, I know that the fear itself, what is that old line from that president? Nothing to fear but fear itself. I mean, those guys are all Masons. They're magicians. They know how this stuff works. You should take that to heart, you know? It's like, in order to be objective and to see the universe as it really is, you have to be able to look at danger and not react, right? And I do believe, you know, that they're they are scaring people on purpose, making people dumb and dividing them with divisive rhetoric is making them more manageable and easier to direct their attention to trivial things because they're already inclined to avoid facing threats head on because they're all cowards. I mean, you know, I'm not trying to be mean here, but I never would have imagined that the human race, especially in the United States, were really this cowardly. It really is just absolutely mind-blowing. What are people afraid of? You know, if you guys haven't watched my Mastering Fear live stream or Mastering Fear video that I made a long time ago, I was still pretty awkward on camera. Definitely worth going back and having a look at these things because I think I really make a good case for fearlessness, you know, and of course it's fearlessness with discretion, not promoting just being, you know, a complete moron and getting yourself hurt. Let's be clear. By the way, you guys, do me a favor, if you appreciate this content, hit the like button, share these videos, subscribe, hit the bell notification. You can join our secret streams, which usually happen every Sunday, more or less. We've been working through the 28th degree of Freemasonry using a formerly secret book of the Freemasons written by the 33rd degree Mason, Albert Pike. Really incredibly enlightening stuff, especially encourage people that might be afraid of Freemasonry or think that it's evil to check those secret streams out. And you can support us via one of the options in the chat or description. We really appreciate it because we're demonetized, and so, you know, I really did have a lot more to say about this. We had a really intense ceremony last night, and I think I'm still maybe a bit rattled from it. It's pronoun petulance. Man, cancel culture. You know, it's... I have trouble not understanding, or I have trouble understanding how it is that people aren't more suspicious of, you know, a lot of these tendencies, a lot of these cultural phenomena that just seem so obviously aligned with people who could have an interest in influencing the behavior and thought processes and beliefs of the population. You know, the cancel culture phenomena. I'm not saying that I support Andrew Tate or not. Some of the things that guy says are really important and true and need to be said in this time more than ever. And a lot of the other things that he says are completely awful and no one should say them ever. I mean, I think pretty much any sensible person feels that way about Andrew Tate. But the fact that they were able to, well, I would say it's gone on for more than years. De La Fay, 1777. It's been going on for at least centuries. I mean, one of the most interesting things I think a person can do if you're interested in understanding how empire works, Lao Tzu wrote, advice for, I don't know what dynasty it was back then, but, whoever was ruling China back in the days of Lao Tzu. And you can see that population control is an absolutely, it's been a concern of empire since the time of Lao Tzu. The influencing how the population perceives things. I mean, this guy was writing in-depth philosophical basically instruction manuals, like very, very early propaganda way back when. I think that it's just become so incredibly intelligent and sophisticated. People really underestimate the influence of world governments, I think. It's just really too scary for a lot of people to think about. You know what I mean? And this is why we have to connect with our inner strength, with our sense of purpose, so that our highest purpose on this earth is the only thing we care about. That way you can't be intimidated. You can't be dissuaded. You can't be coerced, because, your conviction and dedication is authentic. And that's the thing. And this is why you have to use real, true, organic processes like plant medicine and meditation and pranayama, and learning to access flow state as much as you possibly can, because it has to be authentic connection to that sense of purpose. It cannot, when people try to adopt a religion, for example, and people notice, Christians are so hypocritical, and there's so many hypocritical Muslims, and all these people that belong to actual, institutionalized religions that are just trying to follow some code of conduct by means of willpower. It doesn't work. Look at them. They're all hypocrites, But if your change comes, if your conviction comes from organic processes that are catalyzed from within, and actually have this transformative effect for real, then there is no effort required. You don't have to try to conform to a set of rules. You don't have to try to learn and memorize some narrative. You're not looking to conform to, herd conformity becomes irrelevant. You know what I mean? This is what we all have to do. And again, earlier, I know I'm a little bit scattered tonight due to sheer exhaustion. But I think earlier I may have failed to close my circle and make the point that I literally just forgot. See what I mean about being totally exhausted? Anyways, yeah, man, that sucks, because that was going to be an important point. Oh, that's what it is. Trying to convince people through rhetoric, through discussion, through conversation, logic, reason. It doesn't matter if you're correct or not. It doesn't matter if it's obvious. I beat my head into the walls for years, not understanding this. I see a lot of people doing it. I can save you. Thank you a lot, De La Fay. I see a lot of other people doing it. I've been saying this shit to this person over and over again, and it's obviously correct. And it's just, like, how can they possibly? You guys have to look at how psychology works. Really try to wrap your head around selective perception. Try to understand cognitive dissonance and all the other cognitive biases that we can have. And, then you'll stop wasting your time. But one thing that you can do that is much more difficult, there are a couple things you can do that are much more difficult to argue with. You know, when you find your own center, when you find your own anti-fragility through having connected with a higher sense of purpose, right? And you're no longer blown around in the winds. You're leading by example, you know. You live your life on your terms in accordance with a certain code of ethics and conduct that has been dictated to you by the universe itself, right? When you do that, people can't help but notice. And it's much more efficacious at changing opinion to set an example than it is to try to formulate an argument. No matter how solid your argument is, your best bet for translating truth to people is by living by example. That is the alchemical gold that we are trying to yield up. And by the way, you guys, you know, this is a conversation, so feel free to interact with me in the chat. And if you have any thoughts in your mind, I would love to hear them. The interactive aspect of this channel is one of my favorite things. And you know, I don't want to call it life coaching, but flow state lifestyle. I am doing one-on-one consultations, so you can contact me if you think you might be interested in that. And when it comes to developing anti-fragility, that is, you know, the process basically that yields a state of mind where this this ability to live life on your terms is, you know, it's an organic, unavoidable consequence of doing certain things. If you do certain things, certain results will follow. You know, that's an old quote from Aleister Crowley's Magic in Theory and Practice, where he opens the book by saying, this book is a book of angels and demons and Sephiroth and, you know, conjurations and many other things that may or may not be real. It is immaterial to the student whether they are objectively real or not. What matters is that if you do certain things, certain results will follow. And so, you know, that is the basic premise for flow state lifestyle that I've been designing. The biggest culture shock that I have experienced is trying to live in a culture that is supposed to be my own, that I had no ability to relate to or understand. You know, I was born this way. I didn't wake up one day. I remember on the elementary school playground when I was only like, you know, 7 years old. I don't know how old are you in second grade? Because I'm sure maybe third grade, because I had moved to, yeah, it was my first year at the new school. So third grade, I remember I had been thinking, you know, okay, so if you're born in India, you're probably Hindu, you know, maybe Buddhist, whatever, you know, and in China, they have this religion, and if you're, you know, born in some tribal, whatever they think is what you believe, and then here it's Christianity in the South in the United States, how do people not just look around themselves and realize, okay, wherever you're born generally just influences your religious beliefs, so that means that none of them are true. It's that simple. It's that simple. If the Muslim believes with absolute conviction that his religion is correct, and the Christian believes with absolute conviction, that means that the belief of a person is irrelevant, right? So, you know, I was thinking about this kind of stuff as a very small child. I was out on the playground, and I don't know how it came up, but around that time period, there was a little girl that said something to me about going to her church or something, or the devil. I think she mentioned the devil, and I said, well, no, it was church. I think she invited me to church, and I said, oh no, I'm not Christian. And she said, well, then you're a devil worshiper. And I, you know, even as a child, I had the presence of mind to say, how could I be a devil worshiper if I just don't believe in the entire religion? That's a component of your religion. Like, how do you not understand it? And she said, well, my daddy says that if you're not a Christian, you're just automatically a devil worshiper. And that is sort of, that situation has been basically the standard that, you know, that's how, like, my entire existence in the United States felt. Like I was just always so alienated from everyone because I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican, I have no religion. You know what I mean? I'm not a liberal, I'm not a conservative. You know, there's just really nowhere because I'm only following my own narrative. I don't ascribe to any doctrine. You know, belief is the death of intelligence, and um, yeah. So ironically, being in my own culture was the biggest culture shock that I've ever experienced because my value system came from I don't know where, from within. It did not reflect my parents, or it's really strange. You know, it's one of the reasons, honestly, that I'm more inclined to believe in reincarnation because I seem to have arrived with my basic instructions already intact and my life philosophy basically already defined. You know, I mean, as far back as I can remember, I've had the same kind of obsession with metaphysics and the same derision, uh, you know, that I look at the culture in the United States with. So, but you know, I will mention one of the other biggest culture shocks that I had is when I realized that when I moved to Ecuador, I'd been living here for a while, that there were actually decent people as the standard, and that actually meant something different than it does in the United States. That just the level of like decency and consideration, it's just I'm not saying there are no good people in the United States, but it really hit me what a bunch of vapid, self-absorbed, selfish pieces of shit. You know that you can be that in the United States, and you're still meeting a sort of mandatory minimum cultural requirement for personal conduct. Um, so that was a bit of a shock to realize that Americans actually are um, just as awful relative to a lot of the other places in the world as people think. You know, and the biggest spiritual culture shock you have ever experienced is probably the de-evolution of the left in the United States because and also just sort of what started out as woke culture, not woke culture, that's what it became. But there was like a genuine movement and consciousness in the late 90s and early 2000s that it was legitimate, it was real. And I really thought that it was a continuation or an extinction of what started in the 1960s. You know, I've been saying since high school that what happened in the 1960s was sort of like the tremors before the actual earthquake event, which I expected to start in 2012, like so many other people. And you know, I don't think necessarily that was incorrect, but you know, the spiritual shock that I'm referring to is watching all of those people that are around my age completely forget what we had learned back then. And also to see the sort of cognitive dissonance and hypocrisy and the collective amnesia that people are capable of. I'll give you an example from the realm of politics that really highlights and elucidates, pontificate upon this particular cognitive aberration that is collective amnesia, selective perception, cognitive dissonance. It's a whole lot of things. But in when Donald Trump ran against Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump ran, the blue side was crying foul and saying that the Russians hijacked the election and it was rigged. And then when Biden won, when he was running against Trump, um, the right said it was rigged, and the left said, "Oh, you're undermining democracy." And they acted like 4 years earlier, all of the same people hadn't said the same fucking thing. And not only that, not only were they acting like they couldn't remember their own selves accusing the other side of this thing that they said you're an asshole for even mentioning. You know what I mean? It's so goddamn insane that it's almost impossible to believe that it can happen, and yet here we are. So, you know, to see the people that were awakening with me back in the day to have just reverted and disappeared and get sucked into the cracks, or maybe they've just, you know, they've gotten jobs, and the monotony of life as a professional office worker or whatever happened to them all has just eaten their soul, and they've forgotten. But it is a shock to see what it has devolved into. You know, we were talking a little bit about propaganda earlier, and this is one of the other subjects that I think has been subjected to propaganda. You know, in the 1960s, and this is all provable. It's not conspiracy theory stuff. They did infiltrate the psychedelic movement, and they did a lot of things. Not the things that people think. Timothy Leary was not a government agent. That's completely dumb. He was legitimately a genius. You know, Terrence McKenna did not work for the CIA. There's people that say that kind of stupid stuff, and it's not real. And that's not what I mean. What they actually did is, like, when the Haight-Ashbury blew up and all the hippies went there and they were all eating acid and becoming illuminated and escaping the matrix, they flooded the area with crystal meth and heroin and guns. You know what I mean? That's the kind of infiltration and subversion that I mean. And it's really silly to me that people don't seem to think that they still do that kind of thing. And I think that a couple of good examples of how it happens is the flat Earth. I suspect could be a psyop, because then if you're, you know, it just makes people that question the official narrative. It's much easier to group them all into, you know, they're all lunatics and nut jobs and idiots. Right? All people that question anything are clearly stupid, because look at these flat Earth morons. You know what I mean? It's that sort of thing. And I think that what began as an actual effort to catalyze a legitimate evolution of consciousness in an entire culture was sort of hijacked and turned into this sort of like woke narrative, where it's actually just a bunch of virtue signaling and superiority complexes. You know, like one thing that I figured out about alternative diets that's really alarming is that vegans tend to be people that want to feel like they're better than everyone else, and then fruitarians are people that want to feel like they're even better than the vegans. So what you have is what is actually, it's supposed to be like a ladder of consciousness and evolution, and what it actually is like a narcissism ladder. Um, you know what I mean? So that's kind of what I feel like happened. The woke stopped having anything to do with actually expanding and evolving consciousness, and it became just a sort of like left-wing speech, freedom of speech governor. You know, like they put in a car where you can't go over a certain speed limit. It's just another method of control, and it's very crafty, because people, it's sweet that people want to take the high ground, right? A lot of these people are legitimately trying to do what's right, right? And the old saying that the road to hell is paved with good intentions is, you know, on display here, because a lot of this stuff is people just trying to protect other people. You know, a lot of people genuinely believe. I've seen videos of liberals, and by the way, I know I've been going after liberals a lot. I'm not a conservative. Just want to be clear about that at all. Nothing even remotely close to that. In fact, I probably dislike them more overall. Um, but I've seen videos of liberals where there's a guy asking them to define a woman, and they're not even attempting, but they are claiming that it's violence against trans people to even ask the question. Okay, so you know that should be a really serious red flag. That you know, when you're creating a cultural narrative where it has been accepted that it's okay to ostracize people that are not willing to deny objective reality in the interest of politicol. You know, that is very much the sort of psychological substrate that the spores of fascism have to be planted into, right? It's a slow transition. And I am afraid that the most paranoid people among us right now are correct. You know, I hope not. Um, but it certainly is a distinct possibility, because this has all happened before. And, you know, it starts with something like that, you know, where it seems like you're just trying to look out for the interests of of an oppressed subgroup, and what you're actually doing is creating cultural acceptance. You're setting up a what do they call it in law when a case goes a certain way, and then it sets a standard for a precedent. It's a cultural precedent that, you know, that forcing people by threat of ostracization to deny objective reality, and accusing people that are only asking questions of violence, right? And, you know, this is largely liberals who are doing that. And a liberal from my time, God, I hate to say that, but, you know, from late 90s, early 2000s, when the Patriot Act was passed, and there was a very loose definition of terrorism, it was the liberals that were saying we have to protect our free speech. It's fucked up that they have created this very loose definition of terrorism that could apply to anyone who isn't just following the official narrative and that goes against the government. And, you know, now they are basically reinforcing and supporting, upholding Patriot Act style political positions. It's the same people. It's incredible to watch this. I don't want to use the word evolve, but this devolve, to watch this culture devolve and consume itself like an Ouroboros. Only an Ouroboros keeps going. This thing, it's like every time around, the circle gets smaller, and if we're not careful, it's going to consume itself out of existence. We're really not that far from that point at the moment, I think. By the way, you guys, hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon, where you can join our secret streams and hear me talk about the stuff that I will not talk about in public. And also, we are still having our plant medicine and hermetic magic ceremony until the end of October. So there's still like maybe 2 rooms, and we could put up to 4 people. Let's see, 2 bunk beds and a bed. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 6 in the big room. So 2 or 3 rooms left, and maybe 3 to 6 people in each of those rooms, and very small groups. And we're also doing a lot of like excursions out into the jungle. So it's an amazing experience. And if you've been considering coming, your opportunity to book is narrowing, because we only have a few spaces left, and we're almost done. Another month and a half. And it's ayahuasca, San Pedro, changa, and other medicines depending on availability. And then we go out and learn about Chiricsananga and Bobinsana and Uña de Gato and how to use all these plants and what to eat in the jungle. And we can go with different indigenous shaman from a couple of different tribes. And so it really is amazing. And Misawai, where I am, is kind of on the border of the Amazon, so we're not like deep in the jungle. I mean, we are, but we're not like, hours from civilization. But there's a reserve like, 40 minutes down the river that is literally rehabilitating and releasing jaguars and tapirs and capybara and anaconda. And so all the animals are still here, without having to go into the deep primary forest to see them. So it really is a great opportunity, and I would really like to just fill it up and not have to keep plugging it all the time. So, yeah, you really just have to find that core place where you are so in alignment with your fundamental self that you do not give a flying fuck at a rolling donut what anyone thinks. It is absolutely and totally irrelevant. And then live in such a way that you set an example that is worthy of being emulated. That's the trick if we're really looking to change things. Yeah, and again, the road to hell being paved with good intentions. You know, I mean, I'm from gay Northwest DC. You know, at least the last few years of my teenage years, and I would sleep in beds with my trans friends. You know, calling me homophobic is just stupid. Um, so I just want to get that out of the way. That's just super stupid. Because I've proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that it's just not true. Um, but in an effort to protect people that are trans, these this sort of trend it has now provoked people because of their crisis of purpose, right? They're empty. They don't know what they are, where they're going, who they're doing. So they're virtue signaling. They're committed to that to the point where there was a woman that I saw on, I don't know if it was TikTok or YouTube, that was so determined to get approval for being ultra progressive that it was clear that her child was not old enough to know what gender really even was. And, she was obviously convincing this child that it actually needed to get surgery as like a toddler. Um, so, you know, and this is where these things start out with good intentions, but they actually ultimately, something like that is slowing the real progressive movement. Because when you absolutely should allow an adult to define themselves however they want, to express their identity however they want, to express their sexuality however they want, as long as it's within the parameters of not like harming anyone. Um, but when people take that and run with it to the extent that they're getting a 4-year old a sex change, people that would support this freedom of expression are going to be reticent because they see it suddenly causing irreparable harm to children. And then we also have another extremely good example of this is the minor attracted person thing. There was a psychologist that was trying to destigmatize, and that does not mean making legal or lessening penalties or any of that. Okay, this is where the conspiracy theorists in that regard kind of have some susplaining to do, because that's when you need to start worrying. But her logic was that if we can destigmatize, then people will be far more likely to get help before they actually do harm. But then, of course, once this starts to gain any kind of traction, people that actually are sick and want to take advantage of it are trying to use it to do exploitative things and abusing what began as a well-intentioned maneuver. Um, and then so once again, these efforts are actually harming the positive impact that the good aspects of being progressive can engender. Um, it really is just all so dildos. It's like a giant forest of giant dildos flopping around and slapping us in the face. All right, guys, I've been talking for about an hour and I'm extremely exhausted, but this stuff gets to me sometimes, man. I try to be tolerant and calm and patient, but I I really, stupidity is really difficult for me, and I want the best for the human race, and it's clear that a lot of them are really really dumb, and I want to see people survive. And if you're going to be dumb, you got to be tough. And so being fragile and being offended by everything, and people just like it's like people will try to construct this sense of identity that makes them feel special and more evolved by being ultra fragile. Like, I need the energy to be a certain way, and if anything is out of order or it becomes even slightly negative, if the guitarist turns on a distortion pedal even, then I'm gonna, it's like, that is not, these people that think that they need to limit their experience to like huffing unicorn farts and blowing lines of fairy dust on a sunny day in Palo Alto, at a festival where there's nothing but really positive, like hippie folk music. You know what I mean? Like, that is not expansion. That is contraction. That is not living in love and light. That is, fear and limitation. And there is no reason why anyone should define themselves in terms of limitation. There's no reason to place limitations on what a person may be or what a person may do. But you have to have courage to experience expansion. The goal, I believe, of life and the experience of the one divine consciousness, the universal mind, is to become like that consciousness in whom suffering and glory are indistinguishable. We are here for the experience, be it good or bad, extremes of light and darkness, good and evil, pain and pleasure. To experience the full spectrum is the destiny of every fragment of the universal mind, and whether you like it or not. And so there is no benefit in contracting your experience to this tiny little point where there are this extremely narrow set of parameters of what is permissible, and what is experientially viable for you. This is not the answer, and there are so many negative ramifications of this. And again, it's really easy to trick people into thinking that they're taking the moral high ground, when what they're actually doing is suppressing the literal evolution of consciousness, and setting up fascism. There's so many variations on this theme. The entire right wing basically think that they are defending the rights of people that think just like them, of course, but that they're taking down the elite, and when what they really are doing for the most part is just becoming mouthpieces for the industries that are puppeting them and putting words in their mouth. So I know I picked on the liberals a lot tonight, but it's really on both sides. It's just it's a different version of the same game, the same trick, the same shenanigans. So I really appreciate all you guys that spend this time with me in these live streams. I'm going to do another mystery school video, and I will do a mystery school live stream with every segment that I do, reacting to Bill Cooper's mystery series. I'm also finally, as soon as I catch a break, I'm going to start doing like reactions to like the greatest psychedelic music, from live Tool performances to Frank Zappa and John Zorn, the sort of occult composer that works with Mr. Bungle, and a lot of people I think that would absolutely love that guy's music have no idea that he exists. So I'm going to try to help him blow up. And so yeah, please do support the channel. Join the Patreon, or you can support one time via PayPal or Zelle, or whatever it is. If you want some flow state lifestyle one-on-one sessions, just send me an email. Thank you guys so much. Find your center and defend it. We just have to connect with our real purpose, and then there is no way that you can't be influenced. You can't be frightened. You can't be persuaded. You can't be cajoled. You can't be manipulated. So it's really antifragility is one of the most essential components to real, true spiritual development and the expansion of consciousness. So thank you guys again so much for spending this time with me, and we'll see you again soon.